Merci beaucoup pour...
Thank you very much for your question, sir. Before delving into the subject and giving an answer, I would like to say, or rather revert to what has been said today, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned. I heard President Adesina saying today that the potential is not enough. It's not all to have a potential, because obviously we do have a potential. We talked about 65% of arable lands in the world. We talked of 65% and even plus young Africans. We have a very able young population who can work, but who needs to work also. We talked about the youth of arable lands. We mentioned water. All this must allow us to recall, as President Adesina said, it has to be reminded of the potential we do have, yet we are in this situation we're currently in. I assume that my brother, President Macky Sall, while thinking about holding this summit we're attending today, I assume, I didn't put the question to him, but I assume that he has pondered over the situation of our continent in the aftermath of the last crisis we experienced, such as COVID-19, and the impacts we felt because of the war in Ukraine. This must have given me food for thought as President of African Development Bank, as President of the African Union, to come and think together on the way we can feed Africa. Let's feed ourselves. So this is the right time to congratulate my brother Macky Sall's leadership. In response to your question on Mauritania, specifically on the livestock sector, well, indeed, Mauritania does have a potential, which is a significant one in the livestock sector. And I've just said, well, it's not all to have a sector, a potential. You need to be able to harness it. And you need to be able to tap into that potential. We in Mauritania, with our population which is not that large, we are less than 5 million, but with 5 million people, or even a little bit less, we do have a huge potential in the agricultural sector and livestock sector. We have about 30 million of livestock. This sector isn't highly exploited. This potential is not well tapped into. We realize that, maybe a bit late you might say, but when you did realize that this potential has to be harnessed, we developed a policy to make the most out of it. In this context, we built on that potential in the livestock sector, and we intend to go by a harnessing policy so that by 2027 we should be able to increase the dairy production to 1,100 tons and to earmark 35% for industrial processing. We should increase our red meat production from 230,000 to 300,000 tons per year, and to increase our poultry to 30,000 tons per year, and to produce yearly 150 million of eggs for consumption. And we think that all this is going to be good niches for employment, youth employment, women employment. In the context of that policy dedicated to agriculture. It is true that we're nurturing hefty ambitions, but we're nurturing good hopes as well that we'll be able to make it in the prescribed timeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, focusing on your country's comparative advantage, leading to massive production increases in livestock, poultry, and dairy to drive women and youth employment. Thank you very much. And my next question goes to His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia. And I'd like to apologize for my earlier faux pas in that regard. Your country is one that I absolutely love visiting, and once again I say Mulishani. Africa is the only continent that really hasn't experienced a green revolution. Your country is richly endowed, and I'm just curious, what is it that you're doing, what is your government doing to achieve the goal of zero hunger?
Thank you very much. First, just to express our appreciation to our host, President Macky Sall, and his team, and also my colleagues, panelists here, and all other distinguished excellencies and delegates that are here. I think it's a very important question, and the answer for us lies around the way we have defined agriculture. We've been defining agriculture in a narrow sense. So I think the first thing to do is to broaden the definition of agriculture, food, security, feeding ourselves, because a dry definition does not address certain key components that will allow us to achieve a green revolution. So the first thing we have done as a country is to recognize that agriculture is a key sector in our economic transformation agenda. Very important. And in doing that, we're drifting away from the narrow definition of fertilizer, of seed, of extension services to mean agriculture. No. So we're putting a program called a Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program as a country. And that, by implication, means infrastructure to support agriculture, road, rail, but also energy infrastructure, green energy, very important. Water harvesting, extremely important to allow us to irrigate, and small, medium, large irrigation alike. Also, to be able to look at food production from the farm, raw material, into processors, value addition, and then to see a country that will move into a situation where we're a center of production, processing, which is what value addition, and distribution within our domestic demand requirements, distribution into the region, and obviously Africa as our first priority, and contribute towards a global food basket, as it were. So I think that's a very, very important issue to us. And to do that, we are looking at also genetics, technology. Genetics, I just want to acknowledge what ADB has done with Ethiopia with regard to resilience in terms of the seed. So appropriate technology, appropriate genetics are very important to us in the crop side, on the animal husbandry side, beef for us, and for me this is a place I was born into. You can say I was born in a cattle crop. So it is very important to have the genetics right because of the yields around there. That can be extremely important to help feed Africa. So it also goes to issues of logistics, issues of moving crop or moving food from surplus areas into our deficit areas. I think it's not just for Zambia, it's for the region, it's for Africa, because we do have, for example, self-sufficiency in maize. It's just as an example. But countries just not far from us need the maize, but we cannot deliver the maize at a commercially profitable level because of logistics challenges. So as a continent, we have to deal with those issues of investments as well around there. And I think it's very important. But also we are bringing in the private sector as critical to our agenda towards the green revolution for the country, for the region and Africa. And here today in our delegation, we have wheat farmers. 3 wheat farmers are amidst us who have come with us as the Zambia delegation. And I think that is important for us as governments to bring in the private sector, to spend public money on the private sector as well, because they are integral to our Feeding Africa agenda. Finally, I can say many things, but it really is not necessary. As a country, we are clear areas where we are sufficient in food, but we want to include that in wheat, we want to include that beef. We have the competitive advantage. Within the climate change challenges, Zambia still has the hydrology, still has the soils, agronomical conditions, still has really the expansive land that is available that should be put into production. But in addition, no need to open new areas when we are underutilizing the existing land for agriculture. So productivity is very important to us here. Small scalers are still very low in productivity. We want to support them to increase the productivity. For the same hectareage, same fertilizer, and same other services or inputs. Very, very important to look at it for us as a country. Finally, just to indicate that it's shameful for us to be hungry as Africa. We must accept that. We must accept that. Political leaders, us here, our farmers, our business people, we must wash away this shame. We must wash away this shame to our children, to our widows, and the like. It's very, very important. Finally, food security is key for political stability. Food security is key for political stability. Very important for enhancing democracy. When people have eaten, they think better. They make better choices. And ultimately, food security is important for economic and social development. So there is a vicious cycle which we must accept: jobs, business opportunities, and indeed social equity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President Hichilema. You've given us much food for thought. You've encapsulated quite a bit in the broadening the definition of food security, a holistic and multifaceted approach to agriculture and a strategy, value addition, technologies including genetics, logistics and infrastructure enabled value chains, private sector engagement, and again, the command to wash away the shame of Africa's food dependency. And food security is equal to political security. Thank you very much. Up next will be His Excellency President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. Just like Zambia, just like Zimbabwe, just like Nigeria, and all of the other presidents who have spoken prior to now, your nation is abundant in resources. Now, the food and agricultural business is a multi-billion global enterprise, actually a multi-trillion-dollar enterprise. So my question to you is, what type of partners are you interested in to ensure that your country and Africa achieve food security and zero hunger by 2030, and in the process create wealth for the people of Kenya?
Thank you very much. First, let me extend my gratitude to our host, President Macky Sall, and appreciate his stewardship in putting together this conversation about Africa, food, and the future. Let me maybe contextualize where Kenya is in addressing myself to two issues, two different crops. On one hand, we have tea. On the other, we have horticulture. Just to give you some numbers, tea, we have close to 650,000, 700,000 farmers. In horticulture, we have about 50,000 farmers. We generate $1 billion from tea, maybe $1.2 billion. We generate another $1 billion from horticulture. You can clearly see that for 10% of the land we do our tea, we earn the same from horticulture. And the difference is in 5 areas that informs the trajectory of Kenya's investment in agriculture. For our tea, among the best crops we have, giving us good returns. The challenge is for the 1.7 million acres, we are getting the same amount of income as 10% that we have in horticulture. The difference is that, number one, seeds and fertilizer make a whole difference. Our seed investment, fertilizer investment in horticulture is higher than our tea, and the difference is as day as night. Number two is mechanization. There is mechanization in our horticulture, from irrigation through processing, and that is why we have 10 times higher returns in our horticulture. Number three is there are more young people in our horticulture than there are in our tea industry. The participation of young people is as significant as you can see from the returns we get from our two sectors. The more young people are in a sector, the greater the returns we get from that sector. Number three is the participation of the private sector. We have a greater participation of the private sector in our horticulture sector than we do in our tea sector. Again, the returns are tenfold. And finally, is technology. The greater the participation of technology, the greater the infusion of technology, the better the returns for our agricultural sector. So what is Kenya doing? Number one, we are expanding our fertilizer input. This year, we have 600,000 metric tons made available to farmers, and it is so clear to us as government that the application of fertilizer, the amount is directly proportional to the output of our agricultural sector. There is no magic, there is no miracle. It's just if you have sufficient fertilizer in the correct quantities, in the correct prescription, you get the outcome. Number two, we are increasing our farming under irrigation from 650,000 acres to 3 million acres in the next 5 years. And we have roped in the private sector to provide construction of dams. We are building 100 mega dams in Kenya and 1,000 micro dams to support our irrigation potential and production. And number three, mechanization. We are increasing our mechanization potential from 40% to 75% in the next 5 years. Again, we have an ecosystem that will bring the private sector into the mechanization of our agriculture, again, so that we can progressively walk away, because there is a reason why smallholder agriculture is predominant in our continent. It is simply because of mechanization. You do not, the extent to which a farmer can do their land is limited to the kind of mechanization and technology they have. And therefore, mechanization becomes a big component of productivity and production. And finally, we will be doing our agricultural extension service, supply of subsidized fertilizer on an e-voucher system that is supported by technology, again, to eliminate pilferage, corruption, and to enhance efficiency. That, in our opinion, is the way into the future. In conclusion, let me say that the fact that we are having a conversation, so many of us as heads of state from our good continent, and we are discussing food, is not a very interesting thing to do. I think we should be discussing beyond food 60 years after independence. We should be discussing about how agriculture is not just going to feed, but it is going to create jobs, it's going to create revenue, it's going to add value, we're going to do export, and that is really the trajectory that the people of this continent expect us as heads of state to have a conversation about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Ruto. Mind-boggling numbers there, $1 billion from tea and $1 billion in horticulture. Recurring themes, the trajectory and transformation in your country being driven by fertilizers, mechanization, technology in the hands of dynamic youth, private sector engagement, and your investment in dams. I love what you said here, Africa beyond food. The presence of your excellencies here today is evidence that we're headed in that direction, and very, very fast too. Thank you very much once again, Your Excellency. I'm going to go next to His Excellency Tiemoko Melie Kone, the Vice President of the Republic of Cote d'Ivoire, for our next question. My observation is that in 2021 and 2022, during the cocoa season, approximately 5 million tons of cocoa were, and Ghana alone accounted for over 60% of global cocoa production. My grandfather was a cocoa farmer, so this question is personal to me. Yet, Africa only controls a small fraction of the chocolate and cocoa value-added market. What should we be doing to reverse this almost 100-year-old trend? Your Excellency, over to you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for this question. But before answering, I would like, if you allow me, to thank President Macky Sall and the President of the African Development Bank, and say to President Macky Sall and all his peers who are here present, send them the brotherly salute from the President of Cote d'Ivoire. And to come back to your question, I agree with you. It's true that be it for cocoa that you know and other products, it is obvious that those who produce the greatest quantity of the chain of production are not those who make more profit. And this is simply due to the fact that if you are not part of the chain all the way through the chain, you cannot hope to make the profit at every stage of the way. And that's what we have noted. The producing countries, and it's not only for cocoa, they have chosen production and commercialization, and this has made it possible to have some resources and to pay off the producers. So what you say is true. That's not enough. You have to be in the chain from the beginning to the end in order to take full advantage of the value. And I think that this is what in Cote d'Ivoire we have understood. And from a certain point in time, over the last few years, we have set ourselves an objective for the processing, as President Macky Sall has said, to be present in the chain from the start to the end. We, as you can see, we have to follow the normal process, and the objective is to ensure that at least 50% of the production be transformed locally, be processed locally by companies that are on site. And this is what will make it possible to take full advantage of the value chain. And I have to say that the results are very encouraging because perhaps now we are around the 30 to 35%, but this objective will be attained very quickly. There are actions that have been launched that are making it possible for a lot of people to improve this chain. And we believe that the 50% will be reached and even improved. And so that everybody who's producing up to the end of the chain can make a profit. Now, just now, we saw the images of young people and women processing raw materials into consumable products. And this is an image that must make us proud of Africa. It is this image, and generally this approach, which has made the President of Cote d'Ivoire 2020 as declared 2023 the year of the youth, so that these young people can get involved in the process of transforming these products so they can get to the maximum benefit. This is what I have to say. You have to be in the chain from the start to the end. Thank you very much.
Vice President Kone, you've said it all there, increased engagement in the whole value chain, production, processing, marketing, and branding. But don't take Vice President Kone's word for it. Recently, I was in Cote d'Ivoire, and I was given a box of chocolates. And I'm going to tell you, it was the best chocolate I've ever eaten in my life. It was tasty, it was just great chocolate, plus it was branded very, very well. And I was curious, where in the world is this being produced? Got to find out. It is in Cote d'Ivoire. So it is possible. We can add value, and we can be engaged completely in the whole value chain of agriculture. My last question goes to His Excellency Uhumadu Mahamadou, Prime Minister of the Republic of Niger. Now, The world is faced with, as we know, chronic food shortages. Your country has an initiative called 3N, Nigerians Nourish Nigerians. What is 3N all about? Just very briefly, I've just gotten a note that we need to wrap up shortly, but Excellency, the question is yours because there might be a few questions to follow.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Je voudrais...
Thank you very much. I would like first to pass on the greetings of President Mohamed Bazoum to His Excellency Macky Sall and his colleagues, and tell him how much he shares all of the discussions and the resolutions that will come out of this meeting. To answer your question, I would first like to tell you that in the context of Niger, we are a country that is not really an agricultural country because it's a semi-desertic where agriculture is only possible in 1/3 of the country. Nevertheless, Niger has put in place an agricultural policy that we call the 3N initiative, Nigerians feeding Nigerian, Nigerian feeding Nigeria, a program which allows us to adapt agriculture to our context and increase agricultural production in such a way that the country is self-sufficient. We have our agriculture based essentially on rainwater, and this is seasonal and only falls between June and September, which means that the rest of the year agriculture theoretically is not possible. But Niger is working with this paradox whereby we have a lot of water on the ground. It is one of the countries that has the greatest water reserves, globally speaking, going from 1 meter to 1,000 meters in depth. So our agricultural policy, the 3Ns, is focused on the increase of the production. When it comes to production during the rainy season, we want to increase the yield by using the best inputs, mechanization of agriculture. And when it comes to the production after the rainy season, we encourage the producers to catch water from wells and boreholes, and this allows us to produce outside of the rainy season the necessary complement to the deficit of the production during the rainy season. And this is how the production outside the rainy season has moved from 100,000 tons to 1 million ton that we are looking at. And for this, we are building dams where possible in the temporary rivers, and we are boring for water at where the depth is not too bad, and sometimes we bore holes, very deep boreholes, and the deeper the borehole is, the more water you have access to, and you can get up to 100,000 liters per hour. And we can use that for much larger surfaces for agriculture and also for livestock breeding. So this is more or less what the 3N initiative is all about. And during the compact that we are going to present in a moment, we are going to be able to contribute not only to feed the Nigerian, but to feed the whole of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Niger, Umaru Mahamadou. Thank you very much for again intimating us with the advances that you're making in food self-sufficiency through improved access to water reserves and by circumventing seasonal water deficits. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, I'd like to thank you because this brings us to the close of what really has been a superb presidential presentation and Q&A session with our Excellencies. Would you kindly give them a warm round of applause? As we thank our Excellencies here for placing the Feed Africa agenda at the very top of your respective development agendas, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to acknowledge their very strong political support as well as their visionary leadership as entailed in the presentations that we have just heard. Once again, I really believe that that deserves another warm round of applause for our Excellencies who have come here for this summit. We're now going to formally close this segment of the opening ceremony and allow our presidents to leave the stage and head on to the Food and Agriculture Delivery Compact boardrooms, which our presidents, as CEOs of their nations, will be chairing. We will be joined by 10 more African presidents for another high-level presidential panel later in the afternoon, after the boardroom sessions and lunch break. In closing, as the saying goes, music is food to the heart, and food is music to the body. On behalf of my co-moderator, Aram Ndao, and we wish you, therefore, bon appetit. Thank you very much.